which was started in the year 2009. Our Chancellor is Mr. Naveen Jindal and our Vice Chancellor is Dr. C. Rajkumar. Within a span of 10 years, JGU has been recognized as an institute of eminence, and Jindal Global Law School has been recognized as the #1 law school in India by QS World Rankings. I have great pleasure in introducing our distinguished speaker today, our alumna, Ms. Ananya Madhusudan. Ms. Ananya Madhusudan graduated with a 5-year BBA LLB law degree from Jindal Global Law School in the year 2018. Currently, she is working as a partner at INMAX Law Offices, where she heads the corporate advisory and succession planning team. Her interests are multifaceted and span across real estate and succession planning, as well as regulatory services. Prior to joining INMAX Law Offices, she also had a vibrant practice in high courts and trial courts of India. During the webinar, Ms. Ananya Madhusudan is going to take us through the fundamentals of developing a practice in corporate litigation. She will also be sharing her experiences of working in important legal matters and client management. She is of the firm view that law students should invest their time in not only reading from various sources, but also asking and seeking guidance from their seniors. With this, I welcome Ms. Ananya Madhusudan to today's webinar with an introductory question that why did she choose to do law at the first place? Welcome, Ananya.
Hi, Shireen. Thank you for such a wonderful welcome. So the real reason I took up law was because I really enjoyed reading, and it had so much of complex issues. There was never a direct answer for it. You could look at it from various perspectives, and that's something which made it interesting for me. And that is something which is something you find very rarely in other fields. Plus, I read there were various cases going on during that time which interested me, and it felt like a good chance and a good step towards my future.
Okay, that sounds lovely. So, how was your experience of studying at Jindal Global Law School? It's a whole 5-year degree. You make friends. You study so many subjects. You interact with a lot of faculty. What were some of your experiences or best moments of studying at Jindal?
I think the kind of education and experience I received in Jindal, I would not have ever gotten it somewhere else. I have received abundance of exposure with respect to assignments, readings, professors we've had. It's been a wonderful experience. It was not just limited to the books and tests or midterms. It was an inbuilt experience of having your peers helping you out, being in the same community. It wasn't like one individual was facing a problem which was different from the other. We all were in the same boat, and that's what made it a very, very insightful experience, because you could understand what the other person is also going through, and not just assume, which is very common nowadays. So it was the best 5 years of my life, to be very honest. I learned so much. I've had my peers to thank for that, and my professors.
That's amazing. It seems like you had a fun time at law school while developing the credentials to become a partner of a law office at such a young age. Did you
Yes.
always want to be a litigator? Is that something which was always on your mind that you will complete your degree and then you will practice? Because the law is a diverse field today. You can do so many things with law. But was this something that you always had in mind?
To be very honest, litigation was something which was not even on my radar or top 5 things I wanted to do after I finished my law. It was something which really scared me, to go in front of a judge and argue a matter or present a matter. But once you start something on your own, you have to take that kind of risk. And even now, sometimes when I have to stand before a judge and argue a matter, I start shivering, or I think twice whether I'm ready for it or not. But then again, that's what law is all about. You experience new things, you make your path in it.
Span of professional journey, why do you think being a litigator is exciting for you?
It's been exciting because I am actually handling matters on my own. So that means that there are at times instances where I am not aware of the procedure, for instance. So I am calling up my peers, my seniors, and asking them on how to go about it, because I didn't, during my course of 5 years of law school, I never interned under a lawyer. But it's exciting because while I am shivering to go in front of a judge, at the same time, the excitement to argue a matter or put my point forth it's just another feeling altogether. And when you do actually manage to get a decision in your favor, that's an amazing feeling, which is very difficult to explain if when you're only in advisory.
How different is it to handle corporate matters on your own? And I can imagine the kind of research and rigor that must go into preparing for cases at a very young age. You're a young law professional right now, and somebody instilling so much of confidence in you, it really speaks volumes of your delivery professionally. So how and what goes into preparing for cases, and especially when it comes to corporate litigation?
Right. So when we receive a new client, or we have to present a matter, we, as a team, that is me and my partner, we first sit and analyze the files, analyze the situation, because it's very easy to jump to conclusions, like this might be the correct option only. But when you are at the stage where we are, we are pretty young, what happens is that we cannot go with the first option that comes towards us. We have to look at all perspectives. We have to look at what the client wants. We have to look at what is feasible for the firm, for the client. And in that case, I believe we have initially always done extensive research, asked for from the client abundance of information, which I know even causes a concern to the client also, that why are they asking for so much information. But if we make one single mistake or not analyze a single document, we can cause that to the client, and we don't want that. And that's something, when we are handling matters independently, it gives us a lot of freedom to decide how this, structure the process. But at the same time, it brings a lot of responsibility on us, because when we have a senior, you can say that, okay, the burden can fall, but the burden is on us, that if we make a mistake, it will not just cost the client, it will cost our firm, our reputation. So we take a lot of consideration, a lot of these factors into consideration when we start working on a matter.
So basically, there's a lot of responsibilities on those young shoulders, and you are doing a pretty good job, and that is why your clientele is increasing. So now let's get into the presentation for today. So I would request you to share your PowerPoint with everyone, and
Yes.
I'll be asking you a few questions on your presentation. So are you able to share your presentation now, Ananya?
Yes, 1 second, please. Is my presentation clear to you?
It's visible now.
Yes.
May I request you to just make it full screen? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's loading. Okay, perfect. So through the course of this presentation, we understand that you'll be taking us through the basics of corporate litigation and also talking about the very important aspect of client management. So the first and foremost question that all of us are eager to know an answer for from a practicing lawyer such as you is, what are the initial steps that are undertaken by you when you get new business or client?
Right. So when we get a new client, like I said earlier, the first thing we do is, instead of asking the client what his main issue is, we first ask the facts of the entire situation. And we just don't go date back to say what just led to the dispute or issue. We go back to way back on say the incorporation of the organization, because you never know where you might find something which will be relevant for the matter. So we first make sure that we ask the client to give us access to all documentation, which we
So
make sure
basically, the
that
due
we, okay, yes, definitely. That's the correct. We undertake heavy due diligence process to ensure that our clients, there might be times where we have faced instances where the client feels frustrated because we've asked them for multiple documents, and some of them might not be of use, but then having those documents, if tomorrow an issue arises, we can just refer to them there and then instead of asking the client to send them to us again. So that is one of the first things we keep in mind when we start the process of taking on a new client or a new matter.
Okay. Ananya, would you like to take us through your presentation?
Right. Thank you, Shireen. Great. So I will, as Shireen introduced me, I'm Ananya Madhusudan, and I'm a partner at Inmax Law Office. I'm also a BBA LLB 2013 batch graduate of OP Jindal Global University. My topic for presentation is the practice of corporate litigation in India. Now, my scope of presentation is basically that I've divided it into two parts, whereas one is the overlap between corporate advisory and litigation, and the other is client management. The reason I've divided it in such a manner is that generally 1 week when we graduate from law school, students prefer to either join a law firm or get into litigation. But there are instances, which are very few, where there's an overlap or an individual has the opportunity to work in both the fields simultaneously, which is corporate litigation. And client management is because when you're into corporate litigation, you're not just dealing with an individual, you're actually handling and managing an organization. And that makes a huge difference on how you take on a client or how you manage or deal with the concerns or issues faced by a client. So to begin with, I'll just give you a very brief understanding of what corporate advisory is all about. As we are witnessing, the business world has undergone a lot of changes. We have various organizations, various startups coming up, and there are multiple factors which go into setting up an organization and running an organization. So how do I come in this? So my job as a when I'm handling it as a corporate advisory, as a person who's providing corporate advisory service, is to ensure that an organization is given all the options and the information, be it legal or business structuring, which will help them in making the right decision for their organization. So for instance, if tomorrow a startup comes to me and they want to set up a business, say in Bangalore or Delhi, so what are the regulatory advisory I need to give them? What are the benefits they can receive? So that is what forms a part of a corporate advisory. This is a very limited part, which I've explained to you. It encompasses a lot of other activities as well. But when I'm specifically dealing with an organization and I'm just providing them corporate advisory services, then I focus on the fact that the information I give them and the steps they take on behalf on the basis of that information prevents them from any future litigation. That is my main scope of work when I'm focused, my main scope of work in the field of corporate advisory. However, there are various other factors which are also involved in when we are providing corporate advisory services. We need to also focus on the fact that as a lawyer, we want to give them only legal advice. However, but a client, a business organization is not just looking for that. I have faced clients where they have not just wanted the legal advice, but they have wanted a restructuring of their entire organization. Now, when we are undertaking a restructuring of an organization, we just don't focus on the legal aspects of it. We also focus on how it will maximize the overall shareholder value or the business value. And that's something which is very important to take into consideration in this field. Second comes into place corporate litigation. Now, corporate litigation, as we've all, I'm pretty sure, would have had our face or a day in courts, but corporate litigation is a little different than what we've otherwise seen, because corporate litigation is not just about one organization or one business suing another. It has a very wide ambit to it because it involves a lot of stakeholders. Now, when I'm talking about corporate litigation, while I generally try to, my general advice to my clients is that we need to take steps to prevent litigation, because we cannot anticipate the result of what litigation takes place, what result would take place of the litigation. If, however, we do have to engage into corporate litigation, then we have to be very, very careful on how we proceed. Now, when I say this, there are different types of corporate litigation which arises, which could be between the organization and its shareholders, or it could be arising out of any mergers and acquisition transactions, or if there's any liability of any of the board of directors or the auditors. So there are a lot of factors which are prevalent in corporate litigation and cases present. So it's a very interesting area in itself, because sometimes you feel that the case is working in your favor, but there are so many, like I said, if you don't do your due diligence when you're working in the field of corporate, the matter can take a very, very different turn for you. Now, the next issue right now, what are the main challenges which as an individual, I have faced with litigation? So, like I've been harping on till now, the first thing which any corporate litigator needs to be aware of needs to have is clarity and awareness of their client. It is very important to be very, very clear regarding the facts of your case. And when I say facts, I'm not just talking about what has led to the issue or the dispute. What I am talking about is what has happened in the past. I have handled, I was lucky to be part of one of the cases. And when I was arguing the matter, the honorable judge asked me a question regarding the organization, which about a document which was dated 3 years back. Now, that document, while it was not relevant to the matter, the honorable judge felt that it's pertinent to be mentioned during the proceeding. If I would not have been aware of it, or if my team would not have been aware of it, that would have been a negative point for us. But luckily, we had engaged in good due diligence to be aware of the entire process, and we ensured that we did not just go back to time when the dispute started, but we went to the entire history of the case from its inception. Second thing, which as a lawyer I have faced in courts, is that a lot of times the honorable judges have asked me that, are you the senior in this matter, or where is your senior, or are you a proxy counsel? Now, I'll be very, very frank over here. Experience plays a very, very major role in the legal field, especially in litigation. And I have always seen that that young litigators find it very difficult initially in the beginning, because you are automatically assumed to be the junior lawyer in the matter, or you are automatically assumed to be the proxy counsel. So this is something which I have not constantly, but I would say that out of 10 times, say 7 to 8 times, I have personally faced that I have been asked by the honorable court or the judge that whether I'm the senior or not. And I think this is something which we can only overcome by being confident about our presentation. And that's something very, very important. I have started becoming a little confident. Initially, when I was going before the court, before the judge, I used to be very hesitant, very, very no, I mean, not confident about myself at all. But now, because I'm handling a matter, I've started becoming more confident, being more clear about what my case is about. Third thing, which is a challenge, is paperwork and clerical work. Now, by paperwork, I basically mean we have all done huge amount of research in our law school, right? But that is not the only paperwork which is there. When I was interning or prior to becoming a partner, what paperwork meant for me was that I will just draft a petition and it will get filed in the or respected court, and that's it. However, my partner, he taught me that it's important for us to start doing all of this on our own, because once we do it on our own, we know the file, the case, word by word. So I actually have prepared the paper book for a few of my cases, gone and done the filing on my own. Now, these are very clerical tasks, and if you tell a junior lawyer to do it, they don't think that, it's something which worth their time. But the kind of understanding you get from doing it, it's completely different, because I have had a very clear idea about my case, because I prepared the file, I did the filing, so I was aware where which point was. And if someone else does it for me, I am a little unsure about it, because I won't know where, which page, or which important section or relevant paragraph is. And lastly, client management. As this is one of the most important things, because the client expects results. And when I say results, it's that they don't want to wait 6 months, 7 months, a year. They want it instantly. So after every hearing, or say prior to hearing also, they will call you, they will constantly ask you as to what is happening in their matter. It is very important to be very uh, calm and soothing to them, because at the end of the day, it's their matter which they're worried about. So we don't if we start getting agitated about with them, or if we are not clear with them, then they will get you will not have a good client relationship with them, a client future relation with your client. Also, I have personally experienced this, that there have been instances where the client will call you in the morning, in the evening, that is morning the day his matter is listed, in the evening before the matter is over, after the matter is over, after that, what steps are to be taken. Now, this is a part and parcel of the entire process. This will happen whether you're in corporate litigation or in any form of litigation or just in advisory, because the client will want information from you on their matter. However, it is very important that the only problem actually we face in corporate litigation is that you're not just restricted to one person calling you. There might be 3 or 4 individuals from the organization calling you, because each of them might be handling a different issue, and they all won't have to get some answer from me or from their respective lawyer to give it to their senior. So these are things which we have to keep in mind when they're in corporate litigation. These are some things which I have faced. I'm pretty sure that others would have also had some other similar experiences in their field. Next, I'll be talking about what is the process which my team undertakes when we're handling a complex legal issue. So it's very, very important to, like I've been reiterating this entire, like I've been saying it the entire presentation, it's very important to have the facts of the entire dispute clearly with you. And due diligence is the most important step in handling any kind of legal issue, because I tell you, if you don't have all the information with you, you cannot proceed ahead. It's unfair towards the client, it's unfair towards yourself if you take half information and proceed with it. Now, when we talk about what we have done is that we follow a very simple process, that we first get all the documents from the client. When we get the documents, then we first make an analysis of our own as to what we think is the issue. Then we ask the client to explain his issue in depth. Now, the reason we do this is that when the client, we have faced this actually, the client has called us and said that, this person owes us, say, about X amount of money. And we're like, yes, definitely, we agree with you. We'll file a case. But then when we review the documents, we realized that there was actually no case. There was no amount which was due. So in this case, we wasted, I wouldn't say waste. I think we did not utilize our time properly, because we should have first done our own due diligence before making or developing a case on the basis of the fact which was given to us by the client. Now, what's continuing? So first, we get all the facts from the client. We do our own due diligence. We understand the issue from our perspective. We understand the issue from the client's perspective. And then we develop a litigation strategy. Now, when I'm talking about litigation strategy, I don't mean that who will go argue before the honorable judge. We're talking more about the fact that what documents do we need to present which will be in our favor. We cannot put in unnecessary documents or abundance of documents, because that way we are wasting the court's time. We are wasting the opposite party time, which we don't want to do. We would rather make our case clear and to the point, instead of going on and extending the litigation, thereby causing problems to the client. So that is something which we follow.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you for a second. I have a question for you, and I think it would be interesting for the attendees as well. So while you're handling these complex legal issues and you have these stages spanned out for yourself, could you sort of give us an example of how you dealt with a particular matter in your work profile, and how did you use your legal analysis and research skills to solve a particular issue which your client might be facing at that point?
Okay, so I was actually coming to it. I have chosen two of my cases, which I think would be best to explain how we've handled these kind of issues. So the case one was a very simple merger case, right? Company A, company B wanted to merge, and they wanted to transfer their entire business with company B, and with the aim of maximizing the overall shareholder value. Both the companies were also in the business of software development. So it was a very simple merger. There should not have been any issues. Now, when we got the case, we also felt the same thing. It's a very easy case. Why should we get into extensive research? But when we went into research, we realized that it is not just limited to filing a petition before the court. We have to go and meet with the regulatory authorities, the statutory authorities, and get their reports whether this kind of merger can actually take place, whether it is not in violation of any of the provisions of Competition Act, or whether none of the companies have, say, income tax dues, or they've not had any past cases with the ROC or RD. So we decided to undertake all of this before filing the petition, because we wanted to save that time for the client and not to face this kind of issues during the legal proceeding. Because what would have happened is that the court could have come and told us that this is not clear, or you have failed to mention this or consider this, and we would have got another date for it. So we decided to solve this issue, all of these other concerns, the external factors, by doing our due diligence beforehand, talking with the client and assuring them that if we do it right now, we can save you time in future. So that is one step. This is one way of how we handle it. The second was that we had to file a writ petition before the Delhi High Court, because as you all are aware, a lot of directors were disqualified because their companies were struck off from the registrar because of non-compliance. Again, we thought it sounds very direct and clear, because if they're struck off, it could be because it is because they did not do compliance. However, when we were looking at the disqualification from only one company's perspective initially, and because we decided we don't want to make the same mistakes as we've done in the previous cases which we've handled, we decided to look into all the companies this concerned our client was a director in. Now, when we did this, we realized that there were multiple companies of which there were disqualifications. And while the client was okay with the disqualification, he did not want to pay the penalty to revive the company. So there were these multiple factors which were there in the case, which we had to handle. So we decided to take it step by step. So before we decided to file the petition, we asked the client, what exactly do you want? Because what we had done as an analysis was not matching with what he wanted. And this is something we have, these are very simple examples I'm giving, because even in these simple cases, which seem very direct, there have been such issues with the client, with handling the matter in front of the judge, that it becomes difficult if we have not done our due diligence or if we have not seen every single document. So when I'm talking about, say, this writ petition, this disqualification, because the client was a partner with director in various companies, we had to ask the director to provide us with the documents of this company. Now we were not, they were not our clients, we were not their lawyers, but it was important for us to see those documents to assess the involvement of our client in those companies. And this is what we've been following to see. We just, instead of looking at it from one perspective, we have generally look at it from various perspectives. We end up confusing ourselves also, but we've come to this conclusion that it's better to look at it from different perspectives, discuss amongst ourselves, have disagreements, and then come to a conclusion while deciding any legal issue, instead of going with the first one which comes up, because that way we are we have if tomorrow a curveball is thrown, or if we are confused with a new situation, if we are presented with a new situation, we can just answer them, because we would have expected that this can also go wrong. So that is there. Does this help with your answers, Shireen?
Yes, of course it does, Ananya. And
Yes.
it's so great to hear you speak and break down the whole process of corporate litigation. And what I can absorb from whatever you have said through the first part of your presentation is that there's so many steps to a case, and there's a lot of complexity involved with each and every step, and you need to be meticulous, otherwise you'll end up harming your client. Time management is a big part of being a successful lawyer, and corporate litigation matters, and corporate litigation in particular is a very expert driven field, and therefore you are learning every day, and every matter comes up with its own challenges. Having understood the basics of corporate litigation, now we would like you to share with us your experiences of engaging clients, and especially what are some of the primary concerns or issues that you have faced while dealing with clients in corporate litigation matters.
Right. Okay. So client management plays a very important role, according to me, in corporate litigation, because you're not just dealing with one person, but you're dealing with multiple individuals. Now, I'll give the reason for that. When you get a client in corporate litigation or corporate advisory, it will be a business. Now, the person which you will be communicating with, your first point of contact, during the first meeting, would be the senior most person in the organization, who might not be aware of all the issues which have taken place or the steps which has led to the dispute. But when you start actually working with the client and you get in more information, your for the first point of contact shifts into multiple point of contact. So you're handling someone, say, from the tax team, you're handling someone from the secretarial team, you're handling someone from your finance team. So it's very difficult in that case, because each person would want a different answer, or there might be miscommunication, because I might have said something to one person from that organization, and something else, by adding something else or omitting something else, the other persons. This could also causes a lot of confusion. So when we're dealing with clients in corporates, we have to be very careful of how we talk to them, how we explain to them any issue, how we actually present ourselves to them. Because again, even in corporate clients, they also want a highly experienced lawyer. So if, say, for instance, sometimes when I have gone in front of them, they have been hesitant, because a 25, 26-year-old woman comes in front of them and says, "Oh, I'll handle your matter." They won't be very confident about giving their entire case load or details of their organization to me per se. But it just depends on how you are clear with your concepts, how you can explain to them, how you can, instead of forcing your ideas upon them, listen to their ideas and then try to come up with a solution. That's been few of the ways which we have managed to we've been managing and handling our clients. It's been interesting process altogether, to be honest. So right, so I'll proceed with how we, yeah.
Just a related question to that, and you can use your PowerPoint to answer that question, is that
Yeah.
how do you really simplify the law for business people? Because that's one of the prerequisites of your job, that you are dealing with business people, and what you need to do is actually break down the complex language of the law in simple terms and actually explain it to them. How do you get to that? I mean, there are a number of students who are listening to you right now, and they would be interested to know about this. This is something you realize only once you start practicing, but it's a major part of your job to simplify the law in common terms.
Right. That's actually a very important question. So what happens, how I do it is, I try to break it down into very, very simple examples. Like I am teaching a class of students instead of talking to high professionals. The reason I do this is that when a client comes to me, they have done their research. They have come to some kind of answer they're expecting to receive from me. Correct. Because now everyone has Google, so you can just search online. But explaining them the process is a little difficult because I can tell them that yes, you're correct. This is what the problem is, and this is the solution for it. But when they'll ask me what the process is, I'll have to tell them, yes, we'll first draft it, we'll do due diligence, then we'll draft the documents, then we'll amend the documents or make the necessary changes, then we'll file a petition. So now all of this for them is legal jargon, even these terms, because for them, drafting, amending, and reviewing falls under the due diligence process. But for us, these are three different processes. So when I talk, most of my clients, when we've had to file a petition or explain them what actually took place before the judge, what I try to do is that I make it as simple for them. I don't try to get into heavy corporate law, company law terms. I just tell them that we're talking about members of your organization or we're talking about you. You have to, as a director. I personally try to avoid using those terms unless I'm writing an email, because when I'm writing an email, then I can use these terms. They have time to read each and every word. But when I'm speaking to them, they might skip over some parts, or I might go very fast and they might get confused or misinterpreted. So when I'm talking to them, I keep it very, very simple. I avoid going into a lot of legal terms, but rather I break it down into very simpler terms so that they can understand it. However, also what I've started noticing, the recent trend is that any organization, the first point of contact, for instance, like I said, is the most senior person in the organization. So when they come to me, they would be having some knowledge of law because they've been in the business for a very long time. So they understand those terms. So I again avoid using legal terms in front of them because they have some knowledge about it, and they can also interpret it in a very different manner. At the end, in law, interpretation makes a very huge difference. So if we make it easy for the other person to understand, we can solve the confusion and the problems faster. That's something we've been following. It's been working out till now. Let's hope so it does in future as well.
I'm
So,
sure
yeah.
that's the best way to approach it. And I found it very interesting that you have the ability to understand that which audience you are speaking to. And very rightly pointed out by you that senior professionals already have a lot of knowledge of law, and actually breaking out down simple terms so they might irritate or put them off. So it is better to speak at that level, and that is something very commendable that you have pointed out. We are also in a profession wherein even after our best efforts, we might not get the best outcomes, and this sort of is disappointing for clients. So how do you manage these mismatch of expectations and explain to the client that we tried our best and simply did not work out? How do you manage disappointments, in short, when it comes to clients?
Right. So that's actually a very important question. So what happens is that the client expects us to give them results. And by results, I mean positive results. I mean, they've also spent some time, effort, money, but it's not always possible. And when it is not in their favor, it results to a bad relation between the client and the person and me. So what we have been following is, and what I generally advise everyone to follow is that after every hearing, I call up my client, right? I'll be like, this is what has happened. I'm informing you that this is what the opposite party argued, this is what I argued, this is what the judge said. Now, when I do this, the client is aware of how the case is proceeding. It is not randomly in the end where it has happened that, oh, it did not work in our favor. We've been going step by step. He's aware or she is aware that how the case is proceeding. Now, if the case doesn't go in their favor, we inform them and we tell them that we can try to appeal the matter, but we feel as their lawyers that it would not be in their benefit. So be direct. If you give them false hope, another mindset which they will have it that the lawyers are just trying to make money out of us. Now, this is the second. Third thing which we do is that we try to tell them that we can help. We try to also sell ourselves. We'll be like, this did not work out. How about we look at it? Look at this. We work on this area. So when I say this, for instance, if someone has come to us with one particular problem, we were not able to get the exact results which they wanted. We don't focus only on that problem. We also decide to work, we decide a business plan to work on other problems. So for instance, I can either describe it as for an organization which has a posh policy, right? They want us to amend it, train their employees. Now, when we're training, when we're reviewing the documents, we found, oh, everything is fine, work ends. But when we're reviewing, we also found some other issue. Now, as a lawyer, it depends on us whether we want to raise it up or not. If we raise it up, the experience till now has been that it shows the client that you've taken a step to helping them to take that extra step, and that's a lot. That's helped in maintaining client relation. But obviously, the clients themselves will feel cheated when they lose a case, and you cannot do anything to make them happy. But all you can do is to ensure that your relation with your client still continues.
Okay. Your advice is very honest and heartfelt when it comes to dealing with clients, that you have to discuss with them, you have to be open to them, and you have to constantly, if you are diligent and sincere, that will come across, and then it will be easier to manage the expectations of the client. Those are really some good tips that you have given in terms of how to manage clients, and also taken us through the fundamentals of corporate litigation. There are a number of students who are attending today's webinar and are eager to know that if they, there are a lot of questions coming in, and one common question that has come in for us here is that why should one pursue a career in law, and if at all a career in law is being thought of, then how does one decide which college to really pursue it from? What are some of the criteria they should look at while deciding the school from which they want to pursue their legal degrees? If you would like to throw some light on that.
Definitely. So I think one of the reasons everyone students should consider a career in law is that law is a field which is used in every area of business today. It's there and present in every area of your life. You never know when you might actually use it or not. So in very simpler terms, I keep on having discussion with my family members. I discuss with them about my work, the new laws which have come into place. And I'm pretty sure my brother's now decided that he wants to get into law. But the point is that it's not something for you to advance your career, but it's something which will help you in your day-to-day life. There are so many things which there's an awareness factor. I wanted to get into law because I like the fact that you could give one particular word, a sentence, various interpretations. That made a lot of difference for me personally. When it came to college, I looked at a college which was giving me exposure instead of focusing primarily on placements and the name of this college. The reason for this was that at the end of the day, when I sit before a prospective employer, they will definitely look at my college name and what kind of college it is, but they would also look at what my development has been in those years of law school. So if I am unable to present myself or express myself, or give them that kind of confidence that I would be a good hire, then the name of the college wouldn't make much of a difference. And for me, Jindal gave me a lot of options. Jindal University gave me a lot of options, wherein I could, challenge myself with new opportunities, which has helped me a lot to date. And this is something I have heard from my peers, my seniors. As a matter of fact, few of my interns also have told me this. So I think that exposure factor, and getting a chance to challenge yourself is very important while deciding a college. Definitely, you people would consider a name, but I think these factors should also be taken into consideration when you're deciding a law school.
Also, I think faculty as well as the research infrastructure which comes into play also sort of adds to your collective education experience in any institution. And I would suggest actually students to look into the faculty as well as the kind of research that the institution is engaging themselves in. And in fact, even the international collaborations which a university might have. All right, so what do you think are the top 3 tips according to you for a young law graduate to make a career in corporate litigation, or somebody who's still in law school and wants to work towards pursuing a career in corporate litigation?
I think first of all, it's very, very important to be active in the legal community. The reason I say so is that I have received a lot of help from my seniors. Now, when I say this, is that while I might be aware of the theoretical concepts of what the law says, how it actually happens in practical or the real world is very different. So it's very important to be in touch with your seniors, to get an idea of how it actually works out in real life. That's one. Second, definitely keep educating yourself. Make yourself a knowledge bank, that you are aware of what are the recent regulatory changes, corporate law changes, legal changes which have been taking in the world. Because if you're going for an interview tomorrow, you may never know what they will ask. And when I was in law school, I used to constantly harp on what I've done during my internship. But I also feel it's very important that during our internships, we focus on, instead of just doing research work, we focus on completing a project. Now, when I say a project, I mean that you connect with your senior, that you start on working on a client and you see through with that client. Now, or definitely it would not be possible during your 1 month of internship, but you can try to be in touch with your concerned senior lawyer and get an idea about how it actually processed. This will give you an idea of how it actually plays out in the real world. And lastly, just be confident in yourself. It's not, there might be times we might not get the job we want, but everything is every job, every work we undertake is a step towards getting what we are trying to achieve.
Ananya, we lost you there for a
Yeah.
few seconds. Could you repeat the last sentence?
Right. Right. Basically, I said that it's very important for all of us to be confident in ourselves. We might not get exactly what we're looking for, the job or the opportunity right now, but whatever work we get, if we are confident about it, it will add a step for us to achieve what we're really aiming towards.
Okay, that's brilliant. Ananya, is there something else that you would like to add through the course of your presentation before we move on to
Right.
onto the second set of questions that are being asked by our attendees?
Great. Yeah. So I'll just try to, I think I've already spoken a lot about client management, but I would want to give you one example of a case I've experienced with respect to client management. Now, I'm not sure how many of you would be aware of the process in insolvency, under insolvency and bankruptcy code, but we had a client and one of their financial creditors wanted to file an application under IBC. So we were representing the company, and now we faced a lot of issues while handling this case. The first issue we faced was point of contact. Now, the person who came to us with the case, the first point of contact, they just said, yes, it's a very easy case. They'll, we're just going through insolvency. And we were like, definitely, okay, sounds easy. Now, if we would have ended it over there, the case would have backfired very badly on us. So we did our due diligence. We found out that there were various other factors involved in it. So we again went back to our first point of contact. When we went to our first point of contact, they told us that, we are the seniors in the organization. We won't know about every single agreement which has gone through. Talk to this person. So then that became our second point of contact, right? And this way we were engaging at a time with 10 to 15 different people. And it was very difficult to come to a common understanding. So we decided as a team that we will not engage at all with so many different people. We will engage with only one person from that client's office who is aware of what exactly took place. Now, in that also, so that person became a middleman for us. So we used to communicate with them. We used to come up with a plan. The person would go and discuss the same with the clients and come up with a plan. Now, this made the entire process easier. So before we chose one person, it took us 10 days to come to a solution. When we did this middleman concept, it got broken down to 3 to 4 days. So that's also something which we need to take into consideration, that we cannot also make everyone happy. We have to do what's best for the client and for us. So I guess that's about it.
That's so interesting, and thank you for breaking it down for all of us. So there's this very important and contemporary question in times of COVID that is coming up in the news about force majeure clauses. So we would just like to know your opinion on force majeure clauses and how is it going to affect businesses? How do you think the courts are going to interpret it? Also, if you could just close your PowerPoint now if you're not using it, and we can have a fuller view of your video.
Right. Force majeure. So that's a very common topic. That's something I am hearing every 1 hour at least about. So see, I'm pretty sure most of us are aware of force majeure, but I'll just break it down that it refers to an event which is out of the control of either of the parties, and the defaulting party can terminate the agreement and will have to pay no penalty because that act was outside the control of the defaulting party. Now, how it plays out during these crises. As we're seeing, most of the organizations are using the concept of using FMC to terminate their contracts. They are doing it from a business perspective, that by doing so, they're not giving a false hope to the other party that this might actually help them. So, for instance, if you and I are into an agreement, right, that I will deliver these goods to you, if I don't terminate it, you will keep assuming that in some time I will end up delivering it to you, say post-COVID or prior to this COVID, during these lockdown times. But that's not a feasible option because you also are keeping that time frame, that gap of, that I will get it, I will get it, I will get it. If not this week, next week. If not next week, next week. So whereas you could have procured it from someone nearby also. So that's a benefit, I think, that, and it's also important to actually do it instead of keeping both the organizations hanging. That there might be a time there might come a time we might be able to revive the situation because we are not aware of it. So if we are in a situation where we are stuck, so it's better to inform the other party that we will not be able, but we will still try, instead of constantly defaulting. So, and force majeure has become a very important clause right now. I have come across few of the agreements recently, where they're explicitly using COVID as an event to terminate the agreements. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your opinion there. One of our other questions by our attendees, Satish Double, is that what are the types of matters that you deal with in corporate litigation? Do they have a criminal aspect solely rely with the law firm, or is it dealt with in consultation with consultancies like the Big Fours?
Right. Okay. So just a little
Did you get the
brief to
question,
answer this, I'll
Ananya?
have to give a little bit of right. Yeah, I did. So to answer this, I'll have to give a little brief about my organization. We are form a part of Inmax Group. So we have Mehra Goyal and Co. That's an audit firm. We have CPA, which is a secretarial firm, and then we have Inmax Law Office. So when we face, so generally we deal with matters based on succession planning, real estate, and general corporate advisory. But in case we have to handle, say, any criminal aspect, so while the law team handles it, when it comes to review of documents, which could be outside our scope of understanding, we share the same with our audit team or with the secretarial team, who have assisted us multiple times to get a better understanding of it. So I'll be honest, I might not know how to read a balance sheet properly, but someone from that team would come and assist me to understand what is relevant in this
You don't need to know
as
that.
for the matter.
As a lawyer, you don't need to
Right.
know that.
So,
But
right.
I just wanted to flag that for us. Students think there's a lot of financial diligence which lawyers should know about. But if you could just clarify it to for them that you don't need to know everything to sort of deal with corporate matters, because that is one thing that scares a lot of young lawyers.
No, so this was something which was present in my batch also, because I remember we were the first batch of BBA LLB, and everyone said that having accountancy will be very helpful for us. That's actually not the case. Having accountancy or having an in-depth knowledge of finance is not required. A very basic knowledge is enough just to understand what debit balance is, what credit balance is. For other aspects, generally law firms and lawyers refer to other consultancy agencies, other agencies.
Yes. Okay. Please
Okay.
the answer, or is that it that you wanted to respond to the question in that way?
I'm sorry, Shireen, I couldn't get you.
So you completed the answer to the question that was asked in terms of, because I
Yeah,
interrupted you in between and we went on a different
yeah.
tangent. Okay, so the next sort of the next question that has come up for your consideration now is by Nikhil Javali, one of our other attendees, who is really speaking about the what is the scope of cyber law litigation after the post-COVID world, and how does that impact corporate matters? So what is your anticipation of some of the cyber law cases that might come up in the future?
Right. Okay. So see, one of the interesting aspects of corporate litigation is that it encompasses all the other laws as well. You will have some interaction with the tax laws. You will have some interaction with your other laws, definitely in this. So while I might not have in-depth knowledge on how cyber law and corporate law will play out in this, because generally our interaction with cyber law has been limited to organization cyber law policies. I haven't personally handled a litigation matter on that, uh, or any of my clients have any issues with such. But that could, in light of the situations which are going on, that could actually have a major impact on corporate litigation, because there could be cases which would start coming up. For instance, we are not right now, all the individuals employees are working from home, and everyone has access to all the sensitive information, right? So how is that sensitive information now preserved and managed so that it does not go outside the organization? These factors have to be taken into consideration by the organization, but currently this is a very major concern which is being raised up by most of these organizational heads, that how can we permit work from home and preserve the sensitive data at the same time? So that's an interesting thing to look forward to.
That is very nicely put, that sensitive information and how do you handle it. Work from home has become the new normal, and how do companies dabble with that issue with something that all of us are sort of trying to understand. Another question that has come up from Joel Burgess is that what is the role of alternate dispute mechanisms when it comes to matters of corporate litigation? So, of course, ADR is something that you try to do before you go to courts, but how important has that process become over the last 10 or 20 years? If you would like to throw some light on that.
Right. So, like how initially began, that in corporate advisory, we try to all take all the steps to ensure that we don't go into litigation, because litigation is a lengthy process. So when we have a matter where we first try to resolve the matter by discussing between the concerned individuals instead of directly suggesting litigation. ADR actually plays a very important role in this situation, because in case of a company, any corporate litigation, and if a company is involved, it brings a huge, what do I say, damage to their reputation if there's any form of litigation which is going on against them. So we prefer to first have mediation or invoke the provisions of the agreement instead of directly jumping into litigation. So that's actually that's something even organizational heads have started suggesting now, instead of directly resorting to litigation.
Yeah, so that saves a lot of time and cost, and also
Yes.
sort of retains the reputation of the company. And that is something, do you regularly advise your clients that try to resolve it through ADR, and if it doesn't work out, then we'll go for litigation, isn't it? Isn't it a part of so many contracts as well that this, in case of disputes, the seat of dispute
We'll
resolution will
first go
be
for
Delhi or
arbitration.
Bombay?
Yeah.
Or so I think that a
Yes.
lot of business professionals also look for this, because they are looking for an easy resolve if at all a dispute arises. Another very good question that has come about by Miti Srinivasa Murthy is that how important is the knowledge of accountancy for transactions, especially in front of IBCs, because a lot of financial documents
Right.
have to be submitted. I'm aware that you have just spoken about it, but it's a very specific question to deal with IBC, and IBC matters, insolvency, bankruptcy court matters, are something that are on the rise. So a lot of young lawyers would like to know that how knowledgeable should they be about accountancy when it comes to dealing with such matters.
Right. Okay. So I have faced this concern as well when I was, well, like I initially gave the example of the case which was supposed to be filed under IBC. Right over there, when we were reviewing the documents, there were a lot of we had trial balance sheets with us, and they were like, you can just figure out the transactions, right? While I've done accountancy, I don't think I would be fluent to understand that kind of a trial balance sheet, right? So instead of calling upon someone from the audit team, what I did was I broke it down. Now, so when I say broke it down, I broke it down logically instead of focusing entirely or relying completely on accountancy. I haven't come across a situation where it's hampered on how I'm supposed to handle a matter till now. But it makes it easier if I'm able to break down a transaction instead of getting worried that I don't have the required knowledge on how to handle them. So I think my opinion is it still isn't that important. It would, if you can just break it down as per transaction wise, logically, that makes a lot of difference.
And you can always get help in a matter, because that's one component of a IBC matter, not the whole matter itself. So there's always some specialized help available, and it's good to actually factor that in when IBC matters are taken up. Another question has come up from a student who would like to work in a law firm, and according to her, what are the things that a potential employer looks at when they're hiring young lawyers to be associates in their firm, especially when it comes to the corporate world, because it's high stress, high demand, profession, and it is something that young law students especially look forward to joining. They have this fascination as well towards law. So what is your advice to somebody who is trying to make a career in corporate litigation?
Okay, so I'll be very honest again. So when
What do you
I
look at
was
in a potential
hiring,
candidate? Like
right.
three.
So three things which I look for when I'm undertaking an interview is that, first of all, I want someone who should not know everything, should know one topic very well. I'm not looking for you to have an entire idea of company law. But say if you're aware of IBC, or if you're aware of, say, M&A, I'm okay with that. As long as you can answer my questions with respect to that topic. Because it's not easy for us to be fully aware of every single topic. But it's, instead of trying to, portray yourself, that is better to be very clear that I have extensive knowledge on this topic. That's something which I look forward to. Second is that I need someone to be able to match, or not match, but I need someone to be able to be really hardworking, but at the same time should have an interest to learn. Now, when I say this, I mean that yes, do your work. Take your time. You'll finish it in 1 hour. You'll work for 8 hours completely and do it. But at the same time, you need to understand what you're working at. You're not just blindly working on something, but it's important that if I ask you a question and if I say just change the wordings of the question, you should not get confused. You should be able to answer what you have, like, defend or justify what you have worked on. That's something which, and by true, in an interview, that's very difficult to come out, but it's just how the other person portrays themselves to be. Lastly, being confident helps a lot. If you're confident, you can get a job. If you're like confident
And
about
this is
yourself,
something.
about your skills.
Thank you so much, Ananya. And that is something that you would agree most of us law firm. So
Shay,
it's the factors that you just laid down. Uh, yes.
I
Can you hear
could
me?
not hear you last part. Yeah, I can hear you now.
All right. So I was just reiterating what you said, and I was making it clear that those are the same qualities that apply to making that of getting that top corporate law firm job,
Yeah.
and how young law students are always fascinated with that kind of profile. But would you, I'm sure that is something that litigation is a great area of practice, but there are some other opportunities as well which are available to which they should think of exploring.
Right. See, when I had when I was in law school, my mindset was also completely like law, either law firm or litigation. Right? Litigation was never an option, so I decided to mix it up. I got an opportunity to have both, best of both the worlds. But today, okay, so for instance, I have few friends of mine who are have an individual practice. Now, when I say individual practice, I'm not talking about litigation. No, you approach, you make connections, you engage actively in the community, and you talk to seniors, and you get to know that some company is looking for a lawyer on a retainership basis. So that's an option to look for, that instead of limiting yourself to one area, you could consider the other options. Then definitely, it's first of all, it's very important for a law student to understand that there are two ways to go about it. Either you decide on a specialization and go ahead with it, like stick to it, or you take your time and figure out a specialization. right? Because when you're in law school, everyone wants to get into corporate because, oh, high paying, it's really high paying, and it's the life they seem to enjoy in that. But in reality, that's not the case. There are times when in corporate law firm you are working for 10 to 12 hours, and that's not a down low I'm playing. It could come. I know my peers who had to stay in their office the entire night because there was an urgent matter due, right? And this happens multiple times. So it's mainly it's important to first figure out what is your specialization, what area you want to get into, and if you don't want to do that right now, then definitely just explore. Right now, once we graduate, yes, it's the time when we need to start looking for a job and settle down. But this is the only time we also have to actually expand ourselves and understand what we actually like, what suits us, instead of just going by those strict norms that it's either corporate law, tax law, real estate law, or litigation. If we can come up with then, I believe when I had joined Jindal, that was the first time I heard about cyber law, and that was a very niche topic at that time. And today it's such an engaging discussion for students. So that's something that should be taken into consideration.
Go masters after their undergraduate degree in law, and how much would that masters affect in not also in finance or science degree. So how would you advise somebody to do a master's in law or MBA after completing their undergraduate degree in law for becoming a successful lawyer? I for one know that it's not mandatory, but do you think it's helpful?
I really don't think so. I'll answer that because I want to do my master's, and I decided that it's better to first get an insight of how it actually functions, the practical aspects, and then um, go ahead and study more. The reason I came to this conclusion was because when I can when I work, then I'll understand what actually is happening, and I can use that in my master's. And that would be more beneficial and helpful to me instead of just finishing my graduate and then doing law school, then masters. Also, another concern which I think one other factor which students should take into consideration is that once you do your masters, that becomes your specialization. It becomes very difficult for you to move out of that, right? As long as you're an undergrad, yes, in a year or two, you can say move from tax to corporate or corporate to tax. But once you do a specialization in finance, then it becomes very difficult to try something else. That restricts your options further. So that's why I recommend personally that take 2-3 years to get an idea about what exactly is your area of specialization, and then go ahead and do your specialization in your master's.
Oh, that's very sound advice. Also, there's one very interesting thing that you had spoken about earlier to me, is that how there's a disconnect between what we learn in law school and what the practice of law school is. Before I pose the question, practice of law is, before I pose that question to you, I would like to say that traditionally how law schools have functioned is to give you the skills that are required to actually analyze the law and the facts and then help your client, and that's the job of a law school. And once you're out of law school, you apply all that knowledge to real situation. I lot when I was working with Nishit Associates earlier. But what do you think is this gap between theory and practice, and how can young law students who are in their 4th or 5th year prepare better for this transition? Because all of us have gone through that transition. How do you think and have thought that, how could we prepare for this transition in a better way for the real world? So what are your tips for students then?
Right. Okay. So one of the what happens is that when we are in law school, we focus a lot on grades, right? So we just study the topic and we don't really try to understand it. Very few of us take the time to actually analyze the law and how we can actually put it forward in future scenarios or use it. When we come up, while we would have when we graduate law school, we start working. While we would have studied that exact provision, we would have scored amazingly well in that test. We would have been blanked out. We would be blanked out because we don't know exactly how to use that. We learn that this is the way we use it, so we are trying to use that, but it doesn't work out. I'll actually give a very, very easy example, and it's a little hilarious also. We have a course in DPC, right, drafting, pleading, and conveyance, which teaches. So I was taught writ petition, rejoinder, and I was like, yes, that's easy, right? I can do that. I can file a writ petition now. Turns out extremely wrong because it involves a lot of factors, formatting, the exact spacing, all of this. So now while I know the content, how do I actually share that content forward was a concern initially, right? So I spoke to my peers, my seniors. I had one of my friends who sat down, who's a very well known, who's into litigation. He sat down and she explained that this is how you draft it. So that the court will not raise any objections to it, right? The registry. So I did that. Now, these things are something which we have to learn during our internship because it cannot be taught in law school also, right? But also to find that kind of internship is also very difficult because in internships, we are given most of the research work. We don't get to experience also the practical aspect. We just our senior might just tell us research on this topic, and we would have an idea what is it for and what will actually happen with the research. So this kind of thing, something which an individual should take up on their own. For instance, we are taught company law in school, in college, right? But we're not taught IBC. I believe it might be an elective now, but during when I was in law school, it wasn't taught. So, but today, in today's world, IBC is so prevalent, it's there everywhere, right? So now we cannot force the college to teach students IBC. But what we can do is that we can ask the students to take it up as an additional reading, right? So that when tomorrow you're sitting for an interview, instead of saying that I am aware of company law, you talk about what you're aware of in IBC, which is actually more useful right now for the organization.
Very true. You need to keep updating yourself, and I'm glad that you flagged it. That you have to go beyond your textbooks also to sort of develop an expertise in a particular subject area of your interest. So there's a lot of emphasis on reading, writing, analysis, and research. These are the skills that, while you develop in law school, are something that you keep on working on even after you graduate from law school. So it's like a lifelong learning, and you should actually be aware of the fact that there will be a transition from theory to practice, and that is very normal. One should prepare themselves for that kind of transition, because having learned what you have done in law school, now is the time to apply it to real life situations. And law is something that you learn only when you apply it, and there is just no alternative to that. So develop your knowledge, basic knowledge, go out there and apply the law. And so with this, I would like to ask you the last set of questions for today. Many of these young law students in their first year, they're very enthusiastic about litigating in the Supreme Court or in a top law firm. So what would your advice to them be? Should they go into a top law firm or go and practice in the Supreme Court right in the beginning of their law school? Or should they go for a trial court internship? Or should they go for a slightly civil society organization kind of internship, which is more suitable for them? Maybe. What is your
I
opinion on
think
that?
in the first year, it's this is what we followed also, which was very helpful. It's in the first year we don't have knowledge about law. right? We are just getting into law school. And yes, we might have been updating ourselves, learning about other laws. We wouldn't be able to grasp the fully understand it, right? So it's better to join say a center or a research society, because there we can advance on a research skill. Working under a lawyer or a law firm in your first year will not be beneficial as such, because while the work you'll be getting, you will not be able to correlate to it in any manner. And that, yes, you will get a good name on your CV, but it doesn't benefit you or helps you grow in any manner. And I think in the first year, making your foundation in the legal field is more important. So yes.
Okay, that's sound advice. So there are two related questions now. Coming back to the beginning of today's webinar, wherein we were asking you how did you get to be so brilliant. Now let's understand what was going on in your mind when you were taking those so small, tiny steps which led to you becoming a partner at such a young age. So many of our attendees want to know that how did you make these big business people believe in your talent and allow them to give you these complex legal matters, and how did that eventually lead you to a position where today you are handling your own clients in such a short span of time? So what worked for you really, Ananya?
Right. Okay. So I basically hounded people. When I say that, I mean that if I met someone, I had a client meeting with someone, and yes, they were like, oh, they thought that, oh, she's quite young, it's not going to work out. I still kept on, mailing them. So when I say mailing them, not just any regular stuff, but mailing them content to show that I am aware of laws, like publications or research work or anything which I thought would be of the helpful to them, like creating a knowledge bank for them. So that was something which showed that yes, I mean, I feel that it was showing them that I was taking the initiative, that despite they have not given me work till now, I'm doing something for them. So that helped. Plus, I think it was more of my group's chairman and my partner to have that kind of faith in me that we can make this work. It's not easy to be a partner, the kind of responsibilities you get, and it's not just law related or client related. There are other aspects also involved. So it was made easier when you instead of you just first of all you start hounding the clients. When I say that, be persistent, show them you're ready to work. Second, again, have people around you who are confident with you and are able to work. Thirdly, I was lucky to have amazing peers because a lot of them kept on helping me. When I say helping me, I had one of my very close friend who made sure that if there was any client who was interested in corporate work, she would refer it to me. Now that made a huge difference because she is known for litigation, right? She can also be like, oh, I'll take this client for myself. But she helping each other grow made a lot of difference. She referred someone to me. The referral system made a lot of help, and then that's how we kept on growing.
So how important, Ananya, do you think is to stay connected to your friends from college who are now also litigating in different parts of the country? And how does that core strength of the alumni community help you in your work? Is that something that you find useful? Because that's the first point of contact that you actually have when it comes to the legal field and your career. So do you think staying in touch helps?
Definitely. I will not even deny this for any reason. Um, every single senior of mine who I know and I've gone to advice for have taken time to actually give me sound advice, help me out with my legal issues. Even when I've gone with them, for instance, if I'm handling a matter and if I don't have clarity on the law, I have gone to them and asked them, hey, can you help me just understand the concept? And even if they've been working, they've taken out some time, explained it to me, or told me they'll get back to me. I'll give you one very easy example because I was aware I was going to do this presentation. I texted one of my seniors who gave a presentation last week, and asked them, "Hey, any advice on how to go about it?" Right now, this might seem very small, but consider this: that even for something like this, if you can ask someone from your community, how much difference does it make? It makes it easier for you because you have a sound back, group of people who will standing there to help you out. Yes.
Yes, that is so amazing that you shared that, you should reach out and you should not hesitate to reach out, because that really makes your life easy and makes the life of people around you easy in your community. So building your community is something that is very important for any professional. With that, Ananya, I'm so thankful to you. We as OP Jindal Global University are thankful to you to have come back and shared the gamut of experience that you have sort of amassed over such a short span of time. And we, as your alma mater, are proud of your achievements and your journey so far. We encourage you, we welcome you to come back as many times as you can and share your experiences with the community at large. And final comments from your side before we close the webinar for today.
I think this actually was a wonderful opportunity. I have been meaning to do this for a very long time. I am so glad to be here and actually share my experience with the students and my peers. If I'm available for any of the students, if they want any help in future or want to discuss anything with respect to corporate litigation more, and this has actually been just wonderful. I have no words.
That sounds great, and thank you for being so generous. Thank you to the attendees for attending today's webinar. The webinar is completed for today. Thank you.
Thank you.